Hello, TECM 2700 students. I just wanted to come on really quick and discuss part 1 and part 2 of your exams in the practice section to give you some overall feedback that I've been seeing. So for part 1, for the diplomacy, tone, and emphasis in technical writing practice, your instructions were that your colleague Tina promised to send you a spreadsheet full of data that is central to a report that you're writing. She said that she would have to give it to you by Thursday, but today is Friday. Your report is due on Monday. So you were to write Tina a brief email about this situation. In particular, you were to follow the guidelines for diplomacy, tone, and emphasis in business writing from your textbook in Unit 3.2. So I told you all that you could use your textbook and notes, however, you have to complete the part 1 of this. And then you would attach your memo here in Canvas. Well, I want to review and discuss the parts of a memo for you so you fully understand how to set up a memo. Let's discuss some best practices for memos. So for most purposes, you're going to write emails to communicate, not memos, but memos are still common enough that you should know some of the genre characteristics of the memo. So headers are similar to email. So like emails, memos have a to, from, date, and subject lines. So we'll talk about subject lines when we get to email. You do not need a greeting or closing. Unlike emails, memos typically don't have greetings such as dear teachers or hi Tina, or closings such as sincerely Mary. The internal communications. Typically memos are kept for internally to an organization, so therefore they can be less formal, and that's why you do not need a greeting or a closing. There are multiple recipients, so while it's not always the case, memos are often announcing a policy or findings to multiple people. Memos are going to be longer than emails. Normally we want to be emails to be short, and memos might need to be longer. Therefore, some emails function as memos, or some emails will have a memo attached to the email modality. So if you want to know more about the writing, you can check out this link, and I will upload this student technical resource packet for you. So let's discuss emails. Emails are asynchronous, which means that you will send an email and the receiver will respond at a time that's convenient to them. So, which may be never. Sometimes you'll never receive a response to an email. So if you need a response, a different modality would likely be better, such as texting, calling, or pinging through Teams or Slack. So my rule is if someone hasn't responded in 24 business hours, you still need to answer. And you still need an answer from them, try a different modality. Okay? Pay attention to the subject lines. How do you decide whether or not to open an email? The first place I look is the sender. Knowing who sent it helps me frame my reaction. Is it my chair of the department? Is it a colleague? Is it a student? Is it the registrar? The second place I look is the subject line. So the subject line typically helps me to decide whether this is an open right now kind of email or when I get around to it kind of email. So subject lines are tricky to write, and they should take some thought. If the point of the email is a request, to make that request clear, such as edits needed to an A3 document or action needed A13 edits. If you're asking a question, as that question, time for a meeting, ? Ideally you want the subject line to be under 8 words. Make sure you pay attention to the link. There's nothing worse than opening up an email that is endlessly long. So try to keep your email messages to 1 to 2 brief paragraphs. But sometimes there is no avoiding sending a long email. In those instances, it is best to quickly state in the beginning that this is going to cover a lot of ground. Sometimes I will send out a brief email that says I will be sending a detailed email later. So by allowing people to mentally prepare for a big email, they are more likely to read it. When you do have to send a long email, remember to design tools that you have available, such as emphasis, headings, and chunking of emails. So many of you, when you were writing your emails or your letters or your memos, you were taking and writing it all in one body paragraph. You do not need to do that. You need to chunk it into sections because it will make it easier to read and easier to digest for the audience. So pay attention to your topics. When you write an email, you focus on one topic. If you have 2 topics to address, make sure you send them 2 separate emails. Many people use emails as a to-do list. While you might not want to clutter someone's email inbox, a reader who can send that an email requires a short task will likely be able to do it. You don't want those short tasks to be missed or ignored when they are coupled with long tasks. Okay? So when a thread goes off rails, I was recently part of a thread that began with me and one other colleague without adding a prerequisite to an undergraduate course, all right? Over the course of the week, that thread got 12 people on it, and it stopped being about adding prerequisites and was instead about how the language for a completely different course is listed in that catalog. So when things go haywire, write an email to the thread that says things seem to have gotten off track, and then start a new thread with the appropriate people and the appropriate topic. Do not hit reply all if you have to respond just to one person in that thread. Okay? So make sure your purpose is clear, all right? Think about it. Were you able to get someone to open and read your email? Now that you're done reading, you have to think, do you want or do you know what you want them to do? Do you need them to respond? Is there a deadline? Do you need to send something to someone else? Whatever you do, make sure that it's clearly conveyed. So email is a good way to communicate when you need to contact a person who's difficult to reach via telephone, does not come to campus regularly, or is located in another part of the country or the world. For instance, someone who lives in a different time zone. The information you want to share is not time sensitive. You need to send someone an electronic file, such as a document for a course or a spreadsheet full of data or a rough draft of your paper. You need to distribute information quickly to many people. For example, a memo that needs to be sent to the entire office staff rather than just a couple of people. You need to record the communication, or you're unable to ask a direct question or make a request in person. So let's talk about what an email is not. Okay? It's not an effective means of communication when your message is long. Okay? It couldn't be read in 20 minutes or less. Okay? The information is highly confidential. Email is never private. So if you have confidentiality issues, then you might want to think about a memo. The tone of the message could be misconstrued. If you would hesitate to say something to someone's face, don't write it in an email. Then finally, the information itself is emotionally charged. For example, if you must communicate bad news to someone, it's better to deliver it in person. But if you have to do it in an email, such as your Part 1 assignment, make sure you have a buffer. So I call this a compliment sandwich. So you start off with condoning Tina for her hard work and then coming up with a creative solution to help her figure out how she can submit that report to you, even if it's a day late, and stress to her that your report is due on Monday. Then close out the email with trying to help her or figuring out if you need to divide up the work between Tina and someone else. There is an endless array of solutions for this issue. To review the memo formatting rules, okay? The margins, all right, are going to be either 1 inches or 2 inches, right? So the top of the margin would be 2 inches, and then the right and left margins are 1 inch, and the bottom margin is 1 inch. So you want to use a standard font style and size, i.e. Times New Roman or Arial 12-point font. Make sure you're doing single space paragraphs with double spaces between those paragraphs, and all parts of the memo begin at the left margin, not the right, the left, including the paragraphs. And that means they're going to be in a block style format, so no indenting. All right? So the memo's heading needs to look like this. So a formal memorandum uses a special heading, sometimes pre-printed on stationaries. And typically they have the words in the memo are in all caps. Just who it's to, who it's from, the date, and the subject. So you would put the person reading the email. So for example, it would be Tina, and you could come up with a last name for her. Who it's from, and whoever it's from, you would put your name, then you would put who it's from, and you would put the title of your position, and then you would put your initials. And you can put your initials, generally you would do this by taking Adobe Acrobat and creating your initials in there, or you can take a different script font and add it next to your name. Then you would put the date. The date, make sure you create it in the standard format. Do not do it in numbers. So for instance, if today's date is February 9th, 2022, then you would write out February 9, 2022. And then remember what I said earlier about your subject line. So again, 2 inches at the top, 1 inch at the left and right, and 1 inch at the bottom. You put you tab it over twice. You put the receiver's name. Then from, you would only do one tab. You would put the author's name. Make sure you're double spacing all in between here. The body of the message, and then at the bottom, you would put your initials, or the typist's initials. So here is how a traditional memo might look. Right here. To, tab, who the memo is going to, then who it's from, their position, then the date, then the subject, then your message. Notice how it's in a block format. It's not indented. Notice that it is chunked out. And then your initials at the bottom of the memo right there. Again, make sure the opening of a business memo should state your objective or your reasons for writing. So you think the 5 W's. You may answer some or all of those 5 W questions. A person might reasonably ask for reading the subject line of the memo. Typically it's 1 to 2 sentences, and it can supply some background information. In the summary, you have to provide, describe, and analyze the information or the instructions that are relevant to the subject at hand. The key matter is to present the details in an uncomplicated manner. The reader should be able to quickly single out specifically what is important for him or her to know. And you could use bulleted list. However, it's important to not go overboard using bulleted list. So for example, in your initial correspondence case, you could have inserted bulleted list for what you wanted that particular employee to do in order to solve their problem of showing up late to work and talking to other people and not being at their desk. Next is the discussion. When necessary, you need to follow your summary with a section rounding out the details of your business memo. Include contextual material that specifically supports the information or instructions you're providing. Remember that a memo is also a reference tool, and it may be called upon at any time to provide a written snapshot of the previous event, action, or decision. Avoid being sketchy with details. Include names of peoples, times of meetings, actions previously taken, decisions made. Whenever they bear directly about your message, think numerical. Then when you're closing out a memo, you're Closing remarks are an opportunity to restate your observations and analysis and make your recommendations and proposed solutions. You've put in the writing, now call for action. If you expect cooperation, make sure you're being considerate. As in any form of communication, respectful tone goes a long way towards achieving the results that you desire. So, to close out, some notes to remember over memos. If someone other than the writer of a memo keys the memo, the typist's initials should be included. The typist's initials are keyed in lowercase with no spaces or punctuation. If you have an attachment or enclosure notation, double-spaced after the typist's initials and type enclosure or attachment. An enclosure is something included with the memo, and an attachment is a supporting document that is attached by the paperclip or the staple, anything like that. That's why you see a paperclip in the corner of emails if something is attached. If someone, in addition to who the memo is originally written, will be receiving a copy of that memo, include a C notation to let them know that something is enclosed. Okay? So, again, just to review business letters, all right? So, personal business letter is a letter that's sent from an individual using a home address to a person or business organization. A business letter is sent from a business to an organization or individual to another business or organization. And business letters are usually keyed on the letterhead. And the letterhead consists of the business name, address, phone, fax, email, and their logo. So major parts of a letter have the return address, the date line, the letter address or inside address, a salutation, dear sir or madam, the body, a complimentary closing, a keyed name, a handwritten signature, and the typist's initials. The formatting of a letter is the same as a memo. At the top margin, it's going to be 2 inches. The bottom right and left margins will be 1 inch. And block style is one method of formatting a letter. In this style of letter writing, write all parts of the letter and to be keyed at the left-hand margin. The paragraphs should not be indented. Use a standard font style and size, such as Times New Roman or Arial, and 12-point font. Calibri is also accepted. Make sure you're using single spaces within the paragraphs and double spaces between them. Again, here is an example of a block style letter. Punctuation is also a big thing when it comes to letters, all right? The open punctuation, there is not a colon or a comma in the salutation, and there's not a comma in the complimentary closing, right here. Or you have mixed punctuation, where there is Dear Mrs. Smith with a colon and Sincerely Yours with a comma. Usually when you use a comma in open punctuation and a comma at the end, that is more informal, and when you use a colon, that's for more formal letters. So here's an example of a business letter with mixed punctuation. And here is a business letter with open punctuation. So again, there are special letter parts to a letter. The typist's initials are used when someone other than the author types a letter. It has an enclosed notation, which is used when additional items are included in the envelope of the letter. An attachment notation is used when additional items are clipped or stapled to the letter. And then there's a copy notation if the letter is sent to someone in addition to the addressee or the letter address. Okay. So again, some notes to remember. A personal business letter is a correspondence sent from an individual using their home address to a person or organization. A business letter is a correspondence sent from a business to another business or to an individual. Because the letterhead stationery is used, the return address is not keyed. The top of the margin is usually 2 inches. The side and bottom margins are typically 1 inch. It is in block style. It has the typist's initials, and it has an enclosure / attachment and copy. Alright, so to review some common mistakes that I've been seeing is not catching the hash tone of the letter. Alright, you need to work out the issue between Tina, and if you're having a problem, again, what I said earlier is using a compliment sandwich. Compliment or commend Tina on the job that she's been doing and explain to her that, hey, I understand that this is a large amount of work. However, I am under a deadline pressure as well to get my report in on Monday, and then work out a way to figure out the problem with her. So some formatting issues that I've been seeing are not using headlines, not using bullets. You're citing the textbook within the work, which is not what you need, and you're missing a subject line. You're not addressing the circumstances. You need to be more specific, and being more specific adds to the conciseness of your letter or your memo. You do not give a buffer for your corrections to your peer. So what is the actual plan? What is the solution? Give her a specific date, right? And then there's some visual issues. You're using multiple fonts. Make sure you're using all one font. The spacing was off, okay? You don't need to double space. Remember, block style is single space, and you only double space between each body paragraph. Again, stick to Times New Roman, Arial, or Calibri. That will help you. So some email common mistakes that I've been seeing is do not indent paragraphs in your email. You're forgetting your position, title, and the contact information in your signature. Make sure to include how Joe can improve, or how Tina can improve, or whoever. Proper greetings are hello Joe, hi Joe, or dear Joe. Please don't use hey, hi, yo, howdy. Remember, it still needs to be formal. Do not use subtitles in an email. This is not a memo, okay? The subject title needs to be descriptive but brief. Keep it to 8 words or less. Break up the paragraphs to improve legibility and readability. Don't just chunk it all into one body paragraph. No double spacing between the body paragraphs, and watch out for informal phrases to get it back up, or we need to figure out how to get this job done ASAP, right? Organize the email. Each paragraph should be its own topic, all right? You need to have, again, a buffer for the bad news. Do not be too blunt. That messes with your tone, and you are not addressing the issue and coming up with alternative scenarios. Again, if Tina can't get the document to you by today, Friday, at the end of the day, what can you do in order to help her move the process along quickly? So I hope this video helped you with the formats for memos and letters in general, and then I hope it helped you clear up some of these common mistakes that you're making for when you go to do part 1 and 2 of your final.